of December, and we are in the press room of the European Parliament for a press conference on the Clean Industrial Deal implementation package. And we're here with Executive Vice President Séjourné and Commissioner Hoekstra. Executive Vice President, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, mesdames et messieurs.
Thank you very much. Well, after the automotive package yesterday, I'm very happy to be back here today to present another big political area, the reform of the CBAM, Carbon Adjustment Mechanism. This is something that is a big ask of our industry. And that somewhat explains why there's two of us to present this reform. Industry have been calling for this for quite some time. They want equitable treatment compared to their foreign competitors who don't have climate rules restricting them. And our European producers are paying for the ETS, so we need the compensation through the CBAM mechanism. So the first reform then is to reinforce the level playing field and create climate justice by applying, or in the way we apply CBAM. That's a commitment that we made in the Net Zero, or the Clean Industry Pact. You'll know that this is an industrial policy issue as well. We need to tie decarbonisation and our European decarbonisation strategy to competitiveness for our industry. And this reform has both of those goals. We want to stop people getting around the CBAM mechanism. Thirdly, it's also part of the steel and aluminium plan, one of the flagship measures in that. On the 7th of October, we adopted a safeguard clause to protect. It's the biggest steel plan for Europe, and we have targeted measures to limit export aluminium waste starting in 2026, spring 2026. So, as I say, that will kick in spring 2026, and it's going to protect heavy industry with CBAM and the revision thereof. We've done our utmost to make sure we still have a steel industry in Europe in the future. Requests have been made with this safeguard clause. We've reviewed and reformed CBAM so that we have this level playing field. So we promised that. We're delivering that today. As you all know, CBAM has been tested since October 2023, and I'll let my colleague go into the details of that proposal in a moment. But if I had to sum up the reform in just a few points, I would say that CBAM is now simpler, more robust in implementation, and fairer, as you'll have understood from what I've said already. So it's not so much steel and aluminium and cement per se, but rather the product at the end. Metal cable, car doors, domestic appliances, they're all going to be now affected by CBAM. 180 products downstream which are added to the CBAM mechanism. And that is a positive. We're also bringing in new measures to make sure that people can't circumvent the system, which was a little too easy to circumvent in the past. We're also going to put in a temporary support mechanism over a period of 2 years for those manufacturers who are most exposed to carbon leakage in the production of their products. You'll also understand that CBAM is about boosting European industry's position in Europe and around the world, bolstering our manufacturers. We're putting an end to unfair foreign competition through CBAM. That reinforces our production chains, our manufacturing capacity in Europe as well. So it's a good reform, something that was keenly awaited in many industrial sectors, and this reform will, as I say, now complete the package of measures that we've put in place since the beginning of this Commission's term. I'll let my colleague go into the details now, but I am, of course, open to answer any questions should you have them. Thank you.
A very good morning to all of you. Thank you for your tenacity in being here either physically or online with us. And thank you, Stefan, for introducing the topic and for the truly great work and collaboration. Many of you are, of course, familiar with our emissions trading system and the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, better known as CBAM, where the ETS is making sure that we put a price tag on carbon produced within the EU. CBAM is making sure there is a level playing field and that we're not asking anything more, but also not asking anything less for those goods that come into the European Union. And as a matter of fact, in doing so, we are rewarding investments in low carbon. The good news here is that if you would zoom out of this specific proposal, you would find that actually all over the world, geographies are embarking on pricing carbon. So we've seen that in Brazil, we've seen it in Mexico, we've seen it in Chile. The Chinese are, of course, doing it. They're doing it in parts of the US and Canada. So it is truly an idea for which the time has come, which makes this one of the most effective things to do in the domain of climate action. Again, for the European Union, it makes sense to make sure that we balance EU with CBAM. And as you know, CBAM officially starts in January. It's going to put a price on carbon in 6 sectors: iron, steel, aluminum, electricity, fertilizers, and hydro. But we do have had a test period, and we have spoken extensively. Stefan and myself, but also many others with industry and with member states. And the feedback we've gotten, in my view, is very clear. CBAM truly is a very good idea, but it is also a bit like a good cheese with some holes in it. And we do want to make sure we close those holes or those loopholes. We want to make sure that the system works, that it's simple, that it is fair to everyone in Europe and abroad, and that it is effective. And the whole name of the game is to avoid carbon leakage. We're not going to ask anything more from others than what we're asking from ourselves. And during the CBAM transition period, we actually learned very important lessons. We have found that our system is too broad, too clunky, had too many loopholes. So first, we start by simplifying CBAM, and we have done, as you know, that exercise already, taking out 90% of companies. We're taking 90% of the companies out of the scope, while still covering 99% of the emissions that have initially been in scope. And I think that is a very good step forward. A more targeted scheme will ease compliance burden for thousands of companies, while ensuring that those that really matter are actually paying for the carbon they use. And now we're simplifying CBAM even further because we're offering additional flexibilities ahead of the January 1st implementation. We're also coming up with more measures aimed primarily at closing loopholes. And that is a strong ask from both member states and businesses, and rightly so, because it is only fair. We've committed to this in the Clean Industrial Deal and in the Seals and Metal Action Plans. And let me just run you by the 4 main elements. First, we're addressing the risk of downstream carbon leakage. And this will cover only the metal-intensive products and have very simple compliance rules. It will concern goods such as car doors, washing machines, kitchen and garden equipment. And here the aim is to avoid that, for example, a washing machine production in Poland moves to just outside of the European Union because of CBAM on metal makes the washing machine more expensive. And that is, of course, something we would want to avoid. By the way, this will also increase CBAM revenues by 23% and generate roughly €500 million in revenues by 2030. Second point, we're strengthening CBAM with additional anti-circumvention safeguards. And that means that we will be able to take strong anti-circumvention measures whenever we are confronted with evidence of fraud. And obligatory country values will be used when it is necessary to tackle widespread evasion. because we should facilitate trade, but we should not facilitate a fraud and evasion. Third, we're simplifying the rules for electricity imports. And that means that the aim is to calculate CBAM not on the marginal production, but on average emission of the grid, and basically to incentivize further decarbonization. We'll also make technical adjustments to CBAM to facilitate market coupling when the relevant countries are ready. That brings me to my fourth point. We're putting in place a temporary decarbonization fund, and that is, of course, very much linked to the conversation about exports. We're using the money from national CBAM revenues to address remaining carbon leakage risks. The fund will be there for 2 years. We're waiting for the next ETS review, refunding allowances paid in 2026 and 2027. With simple conditions linked to decarbonization in line with the ETS directive, and there will be no additional paperwork. Let me stress that, no additional paperwork, as reporting will be aligned with ETS reporting. And that is hugely important for those sectors that are high on exports towards outside of the European Union. So, ladies and gentlemen, important signals to our industry, important signals on climate action, in line with every decision we have taken from the 1st of December of last year. From day one, this Commission has stressed that we want to focus on the combination of climate competitiveness and independence. Europe is the climate leader worldwide, but this also has to be fair for our businesses and our people. Decarbonization starts at home, but it is fair to seek support from around the world. And we do want to make sure that our businesses, as well as businesses from outside, thrive in a low-carbon economy. Today's proposals, in our view, are an important step exactly in that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, both to the Executive Vice President and to the Commissioner. We will now be taking your questions in the room and from remote. I would just ask to say your name and the media outlet for which you work before asking your question. Let's come to the press room first.
Thank you. Léa Marchal for Agence Europe. I will put my question in French, but I don't know for which commissioner it is. Donc c'est une question sur le fond.
It's a question on this temporary decarbonation fund. Is there not a bit of a contradiction between the main goals of CBAM and this fund? Because CBAM was supposed to avoid carbon leakage and was supposed to foster decarbonisation among manufacturers, but now you're saying, well, manufacturers, you're going to have higher costs as a result of CBAM, so we're going to pay you compensation. Isn't that stopping people decarbonising to a certain extent?
It's okay that I'm answering in English. So I don't think so. I think it's a very necessary measure. And why? Well, we cannot expect that the whole world looks exactly like the European Union's market, right? So those that are producing here, that are facing the measures we're taking in terms of CBAM, and then export will face other conditions over there. So if you want to square that circle, want to push for decarbonization here, but also want to give them a fighting chance on the international market, you do need to do something. And that is exactly what this fund is doing. This fund is there only for 2 years. Then we will solve this more in full with additional free allowances. And that is exactly, I think, the type of combination or the type of situation that will help these highly exporting sectors.
Juste peut-être, vous l'avez compris, l'enjeu.
You've understood that the key stakes for us are implementing a feel and the end of free allocations and how this will impact producers. And so this is going to be a temporary measure in order to avoid economic situations which could be difficult for our manufacturers in Europe. And so we needed to put this file in place, end the free allocations, and organise this more efficiently in order to avoid any potential carbon leakage outside of the current scope. So this is quite a cross-cutting file in general, but it shows that we've really thought this through in its entirety at the moment of implementing it.
Thank you. Let's now take questions from remote. Let's start with Alice.
Hi, good morning. Alice Hancock, Financial Times. I had a question also on the temporary decarbonisation fund. As I understand it, the reason that the export solution, as it was called, wasn't provided for originally in CBAM was the risk that it would contravene WTO rules. I know this is temporary decarbonisation fund, you're calling it, and not an export subsidy, but how sure can you be now that it's not running against WTO rules, or maybe we don't care about that as much anymore? And can you also tell me why the calculation for the fund is based on total production rather than only exports? Thank you.
Yeah, so we do feel that this is truly compatible, right? It is a way to make sure that there is a level playing field also outside of the European Union. We do feel it makes sense to look at highly exporting sectors rather than take a slightly different scope. We also think this will be supported clearly by member states. Of course, what we're doing is we're having a temporary solution and we have a long-term solution. Why is that? Well, because we are currently not opening up the ETS directive that is scheduled for a later point in time. So you have to bridge that. You have to bridge that in a way that is simple, that is effective, that is fair. We do think we have found this way. Just to be very clear, because maybe the numbers will help us as well. This is money that is not going to be in the EU budget. It is the CBAM component of member states. But at the same time, we're using this money directly vis-à-vis their companies. And by the way, I already explained the downstream component, which is actually generating an additional 25%. So we did not seek to precisely match it, but it is convenient that the two are roughly equal.
Thank you. Alice, I see you still have your hand raised. Is it a follow-up? Otherwise, no, unraised. Okay, then let's go to Kate.
Hi, can you hear me?
Let's try again, otherwise we will come back in a bit. Kate, there seems... are you back?
Do you hear me?
All good.
Okay, thanks. It's actually a follow-up on my colleague's question. The proposal didn't seem to specify that this fund is actually targeting exporting industries. So could you just clarify, is this an export solution? Is this something that is specifically targeted to exporting industries, or is it not? Thanks.
So we've deliberately made the scope more holistic. In reality, practically, a lot will be about exports, and that is only logical. Given the conversation or given the outline I just gave in terms of, how do you make sure that this is fair for those who are exporting or the sectors that are exporting heavily outside of the European Union. So I think this is the thing that works temporarily, and then later on we have a long-term solution. And of course, even though there are a lot of conversations about international trade and about the WTO, we do want to make sure that the system is also fit for purpose from that angle.
Thank you. Let's now go to John.
Hi there, John Ainger from Bloomberg News. Commissioner Hoekstra, you just said in your response to the first question that was posed that the Commission will look at solving this more in full by using additional free allowances. Could you just elaborate on that point going down the line? On the fund, how much do you expect it to raise, given that CBAM will only kick in slowly and you'll only be taking 25% of the proceeds? And just lastly, the US doesn't have a federal level carbon price. How will CBAM deal with exports from America? Will a full levy be applied to US goods? Thank you.
So first maybe about the value. From the top of my mind, but I would need to look it up. We're talking about roughly $500 million. So relatively sizable if you look at the whole part of it, but still a relatively small number if you would put it in perspective of overall trade. How would it work? Well, with free allowances, the moment you open up the ETS directive, you can, of course, create the opportunity for more free allowances for those sectors that are heavily exporting. And how you would exactly structure that, we would, of course, need to look at. But that is a way to make sure you help either specific sectors or companies or subsectors to basically continue to decarbonize in Europe, at the same time don't face a price disadvantage, because that is what it would be when they are competing on the international market. I think that is it. That is what I can say for now.
Thank you. John, you raised your hand again. I think it's a follow-up. Let's give it a try.
Yeah, just on the question on the US, the US doesn't have a federal level carbon price. I'm just wondering how CBAM will deal with products coming from America and whether the full levy will be charged. Thank you.
So, two things. One is we will be treating everyone, of course, in the exact same way. What I do know, that's not a full answer to your question, but what I do know is that if you would look at the imports we're getting from the US, that's really a very, very, very small part in terms of the overall level of trade that we're enjoying with our American counterparts. It's, from the top of my mind, significantly less than 1% of total value. Maybe Stefan knows the numbers better than I do. So the exposure is absolutely minimal. The one thing that we have discussed with the US before is how do we, given that this is mostly or maybe exclusively SMEs from the US, how do we make sure here as well that the system is sufficiently simple, which I think is always an ask we understand from our interlocutors, because none of us wants to create more bureaucracy. It needs to be a simple system, and it needs to live up to the parameters that we have set for the proposal. I don't know whether you have anything to add.
Je regardais exactement le chiffre, mais c'est...
I've not looked at the figures exactly, but it's very small, especially given the simplification that we've implemented, which could be 90%. Of businesses are not going to be affected. And so we've already seen a lot of simplification, especially in terms of trade with the US. Especially when it comes to small businesses. So these exemptions mean that when it comes to the volume, this is not really a big issue at all. But maybe later I'll be publishing the exact figures in order to show exactly that this is a very small issue, given the general volume and the goals that we've got with CBAM.
Merci. On peut prendre maintenant la question de Lisa.
Thank you. Lisa now, who's online.
Ariana, good morning. I have a question about the UK. It's Lisa O'Carroll from The Guardian. Is there an exemption from the UK? This was expected as part of the EU-UK reset negotiations, and if so, is it linked to the announcement that the UK is finally going to join Erasmus? And if not, what are the remaining sticking issues, and is there a chance that the UK get an exemption in time for the 1st of January? Thanks very much.
So we are in very good conversations with our UK friends and counterparts on how to link our ETS system with theirs. We're not exempting anyone, but the moment we will be fully linking those two, it is likely that there will be an exemption at that point in time. What is also important to understand that is if you look at the fact that we're taking the latest average of the grid in terms of in electricity, in terms of the mix, but also if you look at this from a broader perspective and you see how decarbonized the UK is already at this stage, the price that they will be paying is actually minimal. That's just one of the realities of how the system works. But I do know there's also, of course, the more principled argument that I think we will be able to resolve once we have linked the two of them. And again, the conversations are excellent, both between our negotiators and our excellent teams, but also between my good friend Ed Miliband and myself on this.
Thanks. Lisa, you have a follow-up, I think.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Yeah, my apologies. Of course, it's linked to ETS. But I guess the question here is, if the European system is coming in on the 1st of January, is there still a chance, even at this late stage, that there will be an agreement with the UK by the 1st of January? Because we all know from Brexit, no matter how small the charges are, the big headache, and the EU now knows it with steel derivatives in the US, the big headache is the paperwork at the border, which can really have a material effect on exports and imports.
No, and that headache in terms of border paperwork, unfortunately, has been with us for a bit longer. But let me not dwell on that. I think this is really a matter of doing things in the right order, step by step, schritt für schritt, pas à pas. Isn't that the way to phrase it? So that means first we need to conclude, and we stand ready to do that ASAP to make sure we link the two systems. Then, in all likelihood, the conclusion is going to be that we're fully linked, and there's no need to have any paperwork left from that perspective. But that is just the order of things as we see it.
Pour la petite blague, ça aurait été plus facile si.
Well, I mean, I'm joking, but it would have been easier if the UK hadn't left the EU. But I mean, that's your business.
Question from Rebecca. Rebecca, you need to press on speak.
C'est le temps de la traduction.
Seems to be.
Sorry.
There you go.
Okay. Sorry about that. Rebecca Galandi from Carbon Pulse. I was wondering if you do find there has been resource shuffling or circumvention in a certain country, then what measures will you take for those countries? Will you apply a single default value? And then I had another question, if possible, on the temporary fund, which is, don't you think that giving money that was collected from CBAM to EU producers will mean that CBAM is contested even more internationally? Thank you.
No, on that last one, no. And that is, I mean, let's first put this into perspective once again, because I think the numbers are helpful. The European Union is spending 8 times as much in terms of international climate action as this system is in terms of size. And now I'm only talking about the EU money. On top of that, you have, and I know that from the member state I know best, you have development aid budgets that are stuffed with money that also go to the clean transition. So, in terms of the balance, I think it's crystal clear that we're not only taking responsibility for climate action at home, we're also taking the action abroad. Then to your first question, in terms of anti-circumvention and how we're going to do it. We're going to look at the combinations of countries and sectors. We are going to start monitoring right away. And 3 months after the formal introduction, so after we've concluded the trilogue, we will come up with an assessment. And again, we're fully convinced that the vast majority of interlocutors, will play this in the way as we should. The thing here for us is we want to facilitate trade. We don't want to facilitate abuse.
Thanks a lot. I think Rebecca, do you have a follow-up?
Everyone has a follow-up.
Today, yes. No? Then let's go to David.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Do, but we don't see you.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi.
It's very disturbed.
Sorry.
Okay, let's take first Adrian, and let's see if David can sort out the technical issue in the meantime.
Oui, bonjour. Adrien de Calan, l'agence France Presse. J'aurais aimé avoir votre réaction sur l'impact du mécanisme carbone sur les engrais. Il y a une colère agricole sur l'impact du CBAM sur les engrais. Est-ce que vous allez prendre des mesures très claires pour les aider là-dessus?
Oui, merci de votre question. C'était une des discussions.
Well, yes, thank you for the question. That was something we discussed. Obviously, we're going to try and avoid input price inflation. We have seen the current situation with the agricultural sector. There are difficulties in various countries, and we have a particular mechanism which will make the whole thing 1% higher than others. So inputs and fertilizers will have a specific situation in terms of imports. So there will be an exceptional situation to avoid price increases. But I would say that this mechanism also aims to ensure that European producers will be able to produce fertilizers in Europe. I mean, here we're talking about fertilizer that comes in from abroad, and normally our system using the mechanism we've proposed would have the same effect, i.e. there'd be a level playing field between foreign and domestic producers. But the point is to see these things produced in Europe as well. So we're not trying to cause problems for our producers, particularly given the agricultural sector crisis. So we've taken exceptional measures on fertilizers to prevent price increases and further costs for farmers when it comes to purchasing and storing imported fertilizer. And once again, I'd say that this is fertilizer that's imported into Europe.
Let's try again with David, if now it works better.
Hi, is this working?
Much better, yeah. Thank you, David.
Well, thanks. Sorry, I joined late, but it's about using the 25% of CBAM revenues that were earmarked for member states, using those now, taking those away from member states and using those for the export scheme. I mean, how much support do you think you can get there? Because, I mean, this was earmarked for member states. And if you don't get that support, if it's changed in the co-legislation process, where will you get that money for export schemes? Because it has been expanded not only to exporters, but also domestic producers, right, under CBAM. Thanks.
Yeah, so to your question, do I assess that we will get support? Absolutely, full support. And let me run you by one more time why I think that is the case. First, we're helping the industry of member states. So this money is immediately spent on the companies that have been talking to them, as they have been talking to us, that they do need our joint help here. Secondly, we're not going to make this part of the EU budget, right? So this is money that immediately is going to spend on the companies of member states, and I think that will satisfy those who are worried that maybe in the end something else will be done with the money. Third, if you look at this from a total budgetary perspective, earlier on in the press conference, Stefan and I have articulated that we're also going to increase the scope in terms of going for downstream products. Roughly the amount that we're going to get out of that increase of scope is the equivalent of the money that we're going to use for exports. We did not try to design it exactly that way, but let's also acknowledge that it is convenient because it makes the conversation with member states even easier.
Thank you. Let's take a final question from Kate. Again, yes.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Hi, thanks for giving me a follow-up. It's a follow-up on the question about the UK ETS link. Commissioner Hoekstra, you said an exemption to CBAM could be likely if the two carbon markets are linked. So I wanted to ask, if a linkage happens before the September 2027 deadline to comply with CBAM, would that mean that UK companies don't have to meet that compliance deadline even though it covers next year's emissions. So they would basically be exempted from any CBAM costs for 2026 retroactively. Thanks.
Really sorry, but even for my British friends, I'm afraid I cannot further polish the answer. The reality is that we're not exempting anyone. What we do is that those, and of course there the UK is the prime example, that we hope we will link in full to the ETS, that will have very, very significant ramifications. And my assessment is that if the full linkage of the ETS has been taken place, that then it is likely that there is nothing in the bookkeeping and nothing in terms of the paperwork that still needs to be done. But we do need to do things in this particular order, even though we're of course very much aware and actively and positively engaging with our British friends and partners on, given that they would have also liked a different order to this whole set of events. But that is something, unfortunately, we cannot change. Again, we will work as constructively as we can and as speedily as we can with all of them to make sure we link the two ETSs, because that, as a matter of fact, is the real big thing we need to fix.
Very last question, I promise. Alice says it's a quick one, so let's go to her, and then we wrap it up.
Sorry, thank you. This is very kind to let me have one last one. I know you said no one is exempt from CBAM, but Ukraine have sent several letters asking for an Article 30 report. I just wondered what the progress was on that. Thanks.
Okay, so much for easy and simple and short last questions. But that's underlines your quality, Alice. So on Ukraine, and we take very much into account, the hugely complicated situation they are in, and we will continue to stand with them in full in the horrible situation they're in. Here as well, it is important to take into account their energy mix. A lot of their production is actually from nuclear. And also, if you would look at their steel production and you would compare that to the steel production of others from outside of the European Union, as a matter of fact, they will have a competitive advantage because they're cleaner. So our assessment is that the impact is maybe not zero, but not nearly in the domain that some have been fearing. But of course, in any case, we will stand ready to continue to engage with them in making sure that this is smooth and doable. Thank you very much.
Thanks indeed to all, first of all to the Executive Vice President and to the Commissioner, to all of you who have participated in the room and from remote, interpreters, Parliament colleagues. We will now have a technical briefing at 10:30 on the same topic, and then at 11:30 on the health package of yesterday. This is a technical briefing. Almost, indeed. I wish you all a very nice day.
Thank
Goodbye.
You.